So I was talking to a couple of my muscle car buddies, and they told me that Dodge has made some changes to the old HEMI. And so I asked MotoMan to bring one in because I could see for myself. The front suspension is fairly sophisticated, and it's reminiscent of a few years older high-end European cars. Has an upper wishbone, two lower links, and a steering knuckle. But two things stand out to me. One is a very, very robust stabilizer bar, and the other is the use of Bilstein front shocks. The Bilstein is an expensive product, and it only comes on the SRT models. Now, these particular shocks have a remote control dampener adjustment from inside the cab. Now, back in the old days, we used to use Bilsteins to modify American cars, and it would make them handle better and still give a very comfortable ride. Now, Chrysler's owned by Fiat these days, but here's something left over from the Mercedes days. It's this wonderful 5-link rear suspension. Now, this lower control arm is made of steel. Well, on the Mercedes, it would be forged aluminum. And speaking of high quality, look at this differential with all these bolts holding it together. You'd think it was a Rolls-Royce. These rubber couplings are very interesting. They take the place of what in America you'd call a U-joint. Now, like I said, they're made of rubber, and so they don't transmit the vibration from component to component. They actually dampen the vibration. And they're very strong, and they're very durable, and they're very inexpensive. The first time I saw these couplings, I was a young man in my early 20s. I was hanging around at Von Dutch's house. He was customizing a 40s vintage BMW for a friend of his. And we had the body off the car, and I was noticing the car, the way it was constructed, was different than what I was used to. And I saw these couplings, and I called his attention to them. And Dutch's mind was a very, very sharp mechanical mind. And he looked at those and he said, I wonder why American manufacturers don't use them. Well, Dutch, it's 2012, and here's an American car with them. Question is, what is a HEMI? HEMI is a short term for hemispherical shaped combustion chamber. A hemispherical shaped combustion chamber is the optimum shape for a combustion chamber to deliver the most amount of torque to the crankshaft for a given combustion. Dodge and Chrysler did not invent the hemispherical head. They weren't even the first to use it. It's been around since almost the beginning of the automobile. Bugatti had them, Fiat had them, Alfa Romeo. I could sit here and just name cars all day. Peugeot had them in 1914. This cylinder head in front of me is an older Jaguar dual overhead camshaft, hemispherical shaped cylinder head design. Not all hemispherical cylinder head engines have dual overhead camshafts, but most dual overhead camshaft engines will have hemispherical shaped cylinder heads due to the layout of the camshaft. But the Dodge is a pushrod engine from a single cam. Now, there's a limitation onto how much horsepower you can generate with a hemispherical combustion chamber because the valves sit on opposite side of the hemisphere, and they open and close and go by each other and miss each other. But in order to get more horsepower, you have to enlarge the valves. But you can only enlarge the valves so much before they hit each other. With the new engine, the engineers have figured out that they would tilt the valves, not unlike the GM porcupine heads. They would tilt the valves so that they would go by each other and miss each other, enabling them to put in larger valves and larger ports. Now, this altered the perfect hemispherical shape of the cylinder head. Still nearly a full hemispherical shaped cylinder head, but not quite. But they've gained more volumetric efficiency by being able to use larger valves, so they end up with more horsepower. The question was, what is a HEMI? Well, back in the muscle car days, when guys were arguing over Fords and Chevys, a HEMI is what you ended the arguments with. And they told me that Dodge and Chrysler have made some changes to the old HEMI. So I asked MuscleMan, Von Dutch didn't hire you. He didn't, there was no money, there was no nothing. You just sort of hung out. Well, see, I've got my own HEMI.